Hello there and welcome to the channel. I'm Dr. Tom Pepper and today I'm going to be taking a look at the debate from a few years ago between Cathy Newman and Jordan Peterson. And I guess one of the first things I'll have to do here is sort of justify my looking at this as a debate analysis. It isn't an ordinary debate. It was supposed to be an interview, essentially a plug piece for Peterson's new book with Newman interviewing him on Channel 4. But it has become one of the most famous conflicts of opinion in recent years. I think it came out in 2018. To justify me looking at this as a debate and doing a debate analysis on it, I will leave a reference here for when Cathy Newman proposes a positive idea, what she calls a radical idea, that the bosses, who she presumes will be male, should adopt feminine traits. She obviously thinks this is a good idea that will work, so she is proposing positive ideas, ways the world should be, and contrasting them with Peterson's ideas. So I'd say it is, in effect, a debate. And since it's since got 28 million views on the video I was watching, and references and links down below, it is one of the most viewed clashes of opinion that we've seen recently. So I think that alone justifies me doing a debate analysis on it, but it won't be quite normal. I'm just going to go through and see what the main problem was. I'm going to have a look at one of the most famous memes to come out of this, which was the "so you're saying" thing from Cathy Newman. I kept a running total of these, which turned out to be most of the work I did going into this video. So I will be doing a little "so you're saying"-o-meter to check out how many times she committed the fallacy of misinterpreting what Peterson was saying. So I look forward to that. The only other thing I wanted to get out of the way is that in my last video, when I was talking about Red Team Review, I called Carmine of Red Team Review Little Carmine. I just had it in my head that was his YouTube handle. But he left a YouTube comment correcting me. So apologies there, no offense meant. I don't know how I got that in my head. But with that out of the way, let's get on with the debate analysis. So let's start here with looking at the problems with Cathy Newman's side. And obviously there is one glaring one, which is what I mentioned earlier with the "so you're saying" factor. She doesn't always use that phrase, but she repeatedly misinterprets what Peterson is saying. Like, not just what he's written previously, but he will just say X and she'll say, "so you're saying Y?" And he'll just go, "no, I'm not saying that at all." And it's very obvious to the viewer watching at home that that's not what he was saying at all. This is the most notable aspect of the debate by far. And hopefully the fact that this became so high profile will encourage interviewers and debaters to stay off this. Like, it's not a good tactic. There's really very little chance you can win with this when your opponent is sat there and can just correct you. Because you look, I mean, at times she looked like she wasn't listening at all, which isn't a good trait in an interviewer and certainly isn't good in a debater. Like, she had so little interest in finding out what he thought and actually combating that. It was honestly like she'd had the argument in the shower that morning and thought she knew exactly how it was going to run, and then when it didn't run that way, she just carried on those rails anyway without actually responding to what was being said. At times it's very strange. One of the most stunning examples of this comes when Peterson is talking about coaching women to get pay rises, which he presents at least as like a major part of his job as a clinical psychologist. That's what he does. And Newman asks him, "so you support women getting pay rises?" And she sounds incredulous. And Peterson just says, "of course." And not long after this, he starts laughing because he realizes how hostile and aggressive the interviewer is. Like, she thinks he's just a dyed-in-the-wool, old-fashioned sexist who thinks women should be barefoot in the kitchen or whatever. And you can have, there are all sorts of problems with Jordan Peterson you can have, but that's not a good line of attack to take because he's simply not going to support those views, at least openly. I've never seen any evidence he supports them privately. So why attack those views? Obviously, a lot of this falls under the straw man fallacy. So a straw man is when you take your opponent's argument and you simplify it, you make it a worse version of that argument, and then you argue against that simplified version and beat it. You've made a straw man of your opponent and you've beaten that, but can you actually beat the real opponent is what the sort of metaphor is there. Now, a straw man is always fallacious, but if you're writing essays, if you're writing academically, or if you're doing a video where one person is talking, optically a straw man can work, right? Because you can convince your audience that that simplified version of the argument is the real argument, and as a result you can come out looking better. It's still fallacious, but you can at least get the optics win. But when you're talking to your opponent, it can't possibly work because they'll just correct you. So really bad move, really bad strategy. As a piece of advice, it's like, well, just look into what your opponent's views are beforehand, and really you should be trying to fight the strongest version of their views, right? Like, that's how you really prove that you're right and they're wrong. You put their argument in the strongest possible terms. You're as charitable as possible to them, and then you defeat that argument. Then no one can say you lost, right? But if you set up a weaker version, the argument really still continues. So like I'm saying, most of my research here was the so you're saying meter. Not just times she used the phrase, because sometimes she'll mix it up and say but you're saying or something like that, but all the time she misinterpreted Peterson's views that came out of the interview or out of the book. So I just gave a mark and a timestamp for everyone. Maybe I'll put up all the times around here. Eventually I counted that she did this 24 times in a 29-minute interview. Nearly once per minute, she would just say, and a lot of them were outlandish. Like, I didn't count minor little things, but like some of them, she just completely flip what he was saying or just make something up or just go completely off topic. It was bizarre. So yeah, nearly once per minute, she committed the exact same fallacy, which makes me think it was a technique. She was trying to do this because that doesn't happen accidentally. At one point, she did it 3 times in a 20-second stretch. She just kept ignoring what he was saying. Utterly bizarre. These are mostly ridiculously uncharitable. I'll include a few here. One of them is when Peterson is asked, do you believe in equal pay? And he says, it depends who defines equal. So you think, okay, we're thinking deeply about the definitions of these terms. But she just cuts him off and says, so you don't believe in equal pay? She's like, what? Where did you get that? Like, she thought that was going to be the response, so that's the argument she wanted to have, but he's not providing the counter-argument. At one point, Newman trots out the line that Peterson had refused to call trans students by their preferred pronouns, which isn't what happened. He just was against the law mandating that, but has always said, as far as I can tell, that if he was asked by a trans student to call them a certain thing, he would do that. Now, that might not be true. He might actually not do that or want to do that, but Newman has no evidence of that. She just attacks him, even once he's corrected her. She attacks him as though he's just utterly refused to call trans students by their preferred pronouns, which isn't something he'd done. It was the specific law he had a problem with. Most hilariously of all, like with a minute to go, Newman just says, you're just interested in whipping up anger, aren't you? And it's like, dude, that's what you've been doing. You're the one trying to create conflict and create an argument here so you can get your gotcha moment and get your watches on YouTube, which worked. Like this style of interviewing or debating is way more likely to whip up anger than like considering what your opponent is saying, thinking about it seriously, and then presenting constructive criticism. And if your view conflicts with theirs, try to find out where the point of conflict is and resolve it. She's got no interest in doing that. She just wants to argue. Or not even argue, really. Like, argue sounds too academic. She just wants to row. She wants a blazing row with Jordan Peterson, and she doesn't get it. By the end of the interview, it was honestly rare to see her either correctly interpret his views and criticize them accurately, or even get annoyed at something he'd actually said. Like, you leave the interview, because she starts to sort of defrost at a certain point in the interview and starts laughing with him more. She doesn't stop the questioning. But it's quite clear she's more well-disposed to him at the end of the interview than she was at the start. And you almost get the feeling these people could probably get on okay if she just stopped these crazy assumptions about things he thinks and just tried to actually work through their differences, right? Resolve any dispute they do have by being charitable with one another and talking about what they actually believe. They probably could get on. But as it is, the debate completely falls apart. It doesn't work. At no point does she get him on the ropes or back him into a corner. It's just a complete tactical dead end. Let's talk about Jordan Peterson too. It's difficult when his opponent is that bad to say he did very well. I thought he put forward his thoughts and arguments clearly, but honestly he doesn't get much of a sustained explanation of anything because Newman will just so you're saying him, and then we'll have to change topic again. In general, I thought he had one piece of arguing that was, I thought, good, which was when Newman asks him why his freedom of speech should trump anyone else's right to not be offended, and Peterson responds that that's what's happening in that interview right now. Cathy Newman's right to freedom of speech is trumping his right to not be offended, even though she might offend him with the things she's saying. This literally stumps her. She can't answer this for a few minutes, and then he literally says, gotcha. She does later think of a comeback, but like argumentatively, that was a fairly good point, well made. There are differences between it, but like he clearly made his point there, and she understood what it was. At another point, Cathy Newman says that trans activists haven't killed millions of people, and Jordan Peterson answers, yet. Now, I hear somewhere she really could attack him on and just be like, seriously, dude, do you really think trans activists are going to kill millions of people? Like, I get there are concerns, but killing millions, really? Like, I think she took the line instead of criticizing the fact that he compared them to Chairman Mao because they're both collectivists or both identitarians. And it's like, well, yeah, there's a fair comparison. But like, she should have pushed him on. Do you really think they're going to kill millions of people? I mean, that's an interesting topic, even if you don't want to argue about it. The other most famous part of this debate is the lobster section, which begins when Cathy Newman just says, tell us about the lobster, like in the manner of a passive-aggressive spouse who's trying to embarrass their partner at a dinner party. Like, oh, go on, tell them about that embarrassing incident that happened to you. Go on. She's not even asking questions anymore. It's just, it's more of an accusation. But so Peterson's making the point that some people think that the hierarchical society we live under is like a man-made, literally men made it. It's an imposition. It's the patriarchy. They organize the society in this way, blah, blah, blah. And Peterson wants to point out that no, hierarchies are completely natural. So to make the point that this happens in nature, he talks about lobsters, who are hardwired to have hierarchies. They're happier when in hierarchies and doing well than when they're not, or they're doing badly within those hierarchies. Now, he does say this is only part of his attack, which is good because on its own it's not sufficient. You can't just go, well, lobsters do it, so it's probably the same for us. Like, it would have been better if he'd made the point, look, lobsters are really, really different to us, but lobsters have this hardwired into their brains, and so does every other animal that's more like us than the lobster. He doesn't say that. If he could, then I think he'd have a really strong case. If he could say, all animals have this hardwired in, why would humans be any different? As it is, it does seem that he's only saying, well, lobsters have it. So that does throw suspicion on the idea that it's a man-made sociological construct, the hierarchies we live under. But with one example, it's not particularly good. Newman still doesn't really attack properly. I think what Peterson's saying is dodgy, but she just comes back with this, so you're saying we should arrange our society along the lines of the lobster. And it's like, well, no, again, that's not what he's saying. So even when Peterson makes a mistake, and I don't think this is his finest moment, I think it's probably one of his weakest moments, she still can't really go for the kill because she's just obsessed with getting this big gotcha moment that she's probably never going to get and obviously doesn't. Overall, then, I think it's pretty clear Peterson won this debate, such as it is. He won the interview. I mean, she got nothing out of him, didn't score a single point. There are points where he was bad, but at no point was she good enough to win even a micro debate. Obviously, that's not to say that his fairly odd brand of rigid ethical rules to live your life by is good. It's not saying that her brand of feminism is bad. It's just saying that on the day, those representatives, Peterson was much better at representing his view than she was on hers. Peterson did occasionally contradict himself, but he was often being cut off and then asked just random questions out of nowhere, so it's understandable. I think he actually did pretty well. If there's one thing you can take out of this video, it's just like body language and looking at how different they are. Like, Peterson is obviously pretty annoyed by the end of the video, and I think it gets a bit uncomfortable. He gets quite aggressive out of nowhere, but like, you can see his body language. If you track along the bottom of the YouTube video and just look at all the frames, you can see he doesn't move. He is completely rigid and he's leaned back. He'll occasionally lean in to make an important point. Newman is constantly leaning in, constantly flustered. He keeps laughing. He's obviously trying to calm the situation. She, at least for the first half, doesn't have any interest in that. She really wants to go for it. So it's good to watch just for body language and how convincing that can be to an audience. Obviously, it doesn't make what you're saying any better, but optically, it's a good thing. So that's it for today. Peterson wins pretty much hands down. Thank you very much for watching. I'll have more content out soon. Please leave a like if you liked the video, share it with a friend if you think they'd like it, and subscribe to the channel for regular updates. Once again, I'm sorry to Carmine for getting his name wrong in the last video, but I'll see you guys soon. Have a good one. Goodbye. This is the part of the debate that Jordan Peterson declares absurd. It's not just absurd, it's wrong. It's demonstrably wrong. It's very dangerous to think that way.